Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Hey.
All
Okay, so
right.
today the hashtag is hashtag Sally, and we will give away a copy of Toxic Superfoods if you win. So we do like a raffle, and so when people put hashtag a name or whatever we put up, uh, we'll do the raffle at the end of the live stream.
Fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Also tell us where you're from, where you are right now, where you're watching, what time it is, time zone, because we get people from all over the world sometimes, and all are welcome here. I'm Dr. Nelson. There's Dr. Kiltz up there. Not here. Uh, and Alia, and of course, we have Sally Norton. Now, I know that most people watching here already know who you are. Uh, I came into this scene 2023, and that name started popping everywhere. Everybody was talking about oxalates, and I think that's when this book that you have behind you was published, right?
20,
2023.
yes.
All right.
January 2023.
Oh, sorry. We're good. I was trying to reduce background noise and I exited your mic. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Okay. She
I'm
hosts
just
a
trying to.
nutrition
pretty
Sorry.
crack here.
Oh, we'll get the technology.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
sorry.
She
Look, we're
holds a
all
degree,
good.
a nutrition degree from Cornell University and a master's degree in public health. Her path to becoming a leading expert on dietary oxalate includes a prior career working at major medical schools in medical education and public health research. Her personal healing experience inspired years of research that led to her book, Toxic Superfoods. And I'm going to let you fill in the rest of the blanks, but I did read that it was your personal experience in part that led you to these findings. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and tell us about toxic foods and oxalates and all that good stuff and what we can do about it. Okay. We're going to have questions. Put them in the chat, please. QQQ, if you can precede them with that. Put the hashtag Sally, SALLY, and the time is yours, Sally.
Well, it's fun to be with you guys. This is a really important arena, be thinking about how our diets are affecting our well-being. And I had that insight in 7th grade with a film strip from science class claiming that, if you ate all these vegetables like broccoli, you wouldn't get cancer and heart disease. But if you were living on hot dogs and French fries, you're going to get sick. And I was like, this is so cool. I was already a nutrition geek in kindergarten. And that's probably because I had my tonsils out at age 5. And that was the kind of experience I never wanted to repeat again. It was very clear to me that getting barred from the swimming pool wrecked your life. And you want to be productive and happy and do what you want and have freedom to have choice in life. And if you're sick, you don't have that. So I was already coming home in kindergarten and preaching like, Mommy, we're supposed to do this and that. And being a goody two shoes around nutrition has been my thing a long, long time. So it was in 7th grade, I realized that nutrition would be a great way to help people avoid disease. So that's been my MO for freaking ever. And I grew up
Wow.
up the street from Cornell, which is not far from Skinny Atlas, where the fine, fabulous, one of a kind Dr. Kiltz has a home. And so it wasn't a big decision to go to Cornell to study nutrition. And I learned some great things at Cornell. Sugar is benign except for dental caries, and butter will kill you. Those are 2 major lessons I got from my professors. I had a professor there who was a great advocate of vegetarian eating, particularly no dairy. And he made this whole career, and I think he was academically censured and he has his own book and so on. So my era of going to school for nutrition was the new era of vegetarianism is okay. It hadn't been, surprisingly, because the field of dietetics was founded by vegetarians, because they spun off of the whole Seventh-day Adventist movement that was very strong at the turn of the previous century, and who dominate the food world now. They own many of the food companies. So it's interesting that we, even in that environment, we knew that animal foods were part of human nutrition and critical to human health. But in the early 1980s, there was a whole movement in dietetics to be permissive with plant-only diets. So I was in that era where vegetarianism was actually super popular. Now we have this plant-based world now, but let me tell you, this isn't new. It's just reaching a wider, younger audience more completely, and has captivated our culture. And it turns out that this degenerating health, which includes fertility problems, is probably related to this incredible pass we're given to plant foods, as if, oh, they're fine. We don't even have to ask if there's any downsides. We're just going to stick with this benefits concept of like, oh, phytonutrients probably good, and not really be curious enough about if there's a downside. And that's just irrational and unscientific, and we've culturally embraced that. So I fell into the dark hole of buying into that personally, and I've had severe health problems that have been debilitating since I was 12. And at age 49, I figured out that oxalates mattered to my health. And lo and behold, a lot of mysteries just solved themselves just by not eating my sweet potatoes, Swiss chard, beet greens, stuff I grew up on, stuff my parents grew up on. Turns out to be a problem. And then with this new knowledge, we have a new set of eyes to see things. You can start interpreting and coming up with some pretty good hypotheses about how individual health problems could be related to diet, that particular diet of growing up on beet greens and so on. So here I am in an era where we love plants, having this unpopular message that you can really hurt yourself on excessive plant consumption. Yeah.
Dr. Kiltz?
Well, Sally, you're the most amazing person I've ever met.
You say that to all the girls.
Yeah, and you're a great dancer, by the way. We had such a great time at Meatstock. It was such a great gathering of people. In general, what are you finding are the ears and the hearts of people that are listening and learning from this concept? And when you use the term superfoods, we're using it because we've been sort of taught you throw all these plants in a blender and you drink them, and that's the healthiest thing for you. But in fact, you're finding something different. And now I had kidney stones for years. Did any doctor ever tell me the spinach that I just love to have every single night was like had anything to do with it? How are we changing minds and hearts in all of this?
Well, there's, in my view, you get lucky if you hit them when they're ready for new information. We really have to meet people where they are. And we know that 80% of the world is still just mindlessly grabbing those candy bars at the checkout, at the kind of, there's this whole tease going on in retail where you can hardly leave any retail establishment without grabbing something that's just garbagey sugar. And then you're going on and being offered French fries and potato chips at every boxed lunch and every meal. So we live in a world where I would say 80% of the people are kind of just caught up in mainstream, just getting by and doing what everyone else is doing. So you're down to 20% of people who are like really in this exploring, looking at choices, being a real choice maker, reaching for the better life. And then within that group, a lot of people already signed up for what I call a pure religion around food and nutrition. So they're already following some idea. And so that's within that 20%, there's 20% who are clearly recognizing the frustration of following those ideas and working. So it's interesting because I'm really just here as sort of a lighthouse. Like, please don't hit these shores. Don't hit the shoals that are going to bust your boat and ruin your life. And I really just want you to know that if you are ignorant about oxalates, you could really hurt yourself. And it's important for us to open our minds and learn things. And I would think that would be a healthy attitude in life. Learning and growing is part of the point of being alive. So we want to grab those people who really want to be alive and learn and grow. So I wouldn't necessarily ram this down anybody's throat, but we are concerned, especially about young people who want good lives, who want futures, who want to get out of this world where it seems like everywhere you turn, someone's got a diagnosis and they're on some medication. And particularly with fertility, this is huge, ginormous.
Yeah.
And we don't even think about preparing our prepubescent and pubescent and adolescent bodies for healthy reproduction. And that's even a missing hole in the culture, which a lot of us who've been in this ancestral space, we're thinking, you know, where do you find health? It's how nature formed us. We were formed by our historical past and our niche in the ecosystem. And how do we get back to honoring that and acknowledging who we're meant to be on the planet? And as the documentary that's coming out makes the great point of the fact that we are carnivores in the ecosystem. So what is this business about spinach in a blender? How is that saving a carnivore? It's like, is that really adding up on its face? And we can just get to some really basic principles of what are we meant to eat? And does this make sense that you're required to have a blender and a spinach patch and these cultivated foods that mostly didn't exist? A lot of the produce department is an invention. It requires intense cultivation with lots of fertilizers and attention and protection. And it's not really a natural thing. If you go outside in a natural environment, you are going to have a hard time pulling together a good salad, because most of the plants you find in the woods are things like pine cones, and it's like they're just not appealing. And no, makes sense for us, for our large brains, our active bodies that need a lot of fuel. Just isn't there in the plants. But this, so the open, who's going to hear this message? It's the person who's ready to hear it.
A question for you. You focused on oxalates.
Yeah.
And so many people talk about things like gluten and latex and others. Is this sort of like the lighthouse of plant phytochemicals and or antigens, but there are many more, but they've already been talked about. And oxalates, really, I mean, I'd never heard about them until you spoke about them.
Yeah, as a kidney stone patient, it's shameful, absolutely shameful, since you can't make a kidney stone. The average 80% of all kidney stone is made of oxalate, and you need that physical ingredient in order to make it. And most of that comes from your diet. Like, come on, people. So there's a whole nother story about science, and the motive in science is to get more funding to keep your career going. And if we were to admit we kind of know what causes kidney stones, it could shut down in a whole field of research and really clamp it back, because we don't need to pretend about what makes a kidney stone. But in the meantime, we're pretending so we can keep getting our funding. So that's another side thing. We can have a lot of fun thinking about these incentives that keep us pretending we don't know what we do know already. And hiding things we know so we can keep things. Like, it's almost like being a parent and pretending that, yeah, the tooth fairy and Santa Claus is definitely a guy. So it's not an antigen, though. See, this is the confusion. We're so used to thinking about problems in foods as allergies, and this is just straight up poisoning. And yeah, think about that. The lighthouse has to shine out light through a prism. Oxalate's a crystal, and you can think of the oxalate crystal up there in a lighthouse, like maybe even distorting where the light is shown, because oxalate is like this Agatha Christie character. It's busy in the background being the murderer and never getting the suspicion. So oxalate seems to be able to deflect attention away from itself. It's like this ginormous character that's in the background that no one wants to think about or talk about. But it's real important to know this is a poisoning. Think of it like lead and mercury. And of course, flavonoids and other chemicals in plants, there are many problematic chemicals in plants. And I spent literally nearly 3 years looking at them all, looking up the literature on lectins and saponins and you name it. And the conclusion was all of them cause digestive health problems. They all get you in the gut, which kind of makes sense because that's the major interface, and it's a very complicated and surprisingly delicate tissue given its many jobs that it does for us. So it turns out that, with poisoning, its dose is a real big thing. So one reason you can overlook it is because in the short run, you tolerate it. But you can tolerate a lot of things. You can tolerate bad light, you can tolerate a bad relationship and muddle through, but it doesn't make your life great. And we have a bad relationship with plants. It's like this sort of addictive, abusive boyfriend that we keep coming back to. And we need to get over him and get straight about what his problems are. And I'll tell you, the foods laced with oxalate, which are spinach, as you mentioned, like spinach is like so wonderful. It's Prince Charming in a Disney movie, and he's so great. And isn't he? Nobody's noticing that he's an abusive alcoholic. So it's like, he's not that great. And so spinach, chard, beet greens, those are really major ones. We in public health tell you need to eat your dark leafy greens. And those are the major candidates for dark leafiness. And they're actually poisonous. And that's just sounds radical to people. And people get in my face about it. Like, oh yeah, spinach is going to kill me. And it's like, okay, well, go ahead, give it a try. But this is a dangerous ignorance. Defending our ignorance is our favorite thing to do. We like the Disney-fied version of reality that, all animals should be pets and petted. No, I'm sorry, but animals are wild, dangerous things. You got to be careful. Even dogs, walking down the street, somebody's dog could literally jump up and bite you. So even domesticated dogs with names and friends and lovers, they can hurt you. And plants, they're supposed to be just there and want to be eaten. They just want to be eaten. They're just there for you to eat them. No, they're there for their own purposes, and they're doing a lot for us already with oxygen and feeding the animals we like to eat and making the world beautiful and doing a lot of cool things for us. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be centerpiece on the menu. So it's just like, I didn't know that where the oxalates were. And I was taught in school that it just causes kidney stones. And poor Dr. Giltz, who's a medical doctor, like all medical doctors, never hear anything about, oh yeah, spinach causes kidney stones or fertility problems or headaches or osteoporosis or degenerating your connective tissues or causing neurological problems and anxiety and mood problems. It can basically make you miserable and you don't know what's doing it to you because, hey, you're eating great.
You have been in the education world. You worked, I don't know how many years, but you worked even in medical school. You are a trained nutritionist in addition to your master's in public health. If you were to try to solve the problem, whatever that may be, which could be a long list of things, but where will you start? Because the story about the temperance movement, and we're way beyond that. Every doctor, every nutritionist, I mean, people say, oh, doctors didn't get any nutrition education in medical school. But if we had, the education would have been absolutely, everybody knows plants are good for you. Don't look at it anymore. Let's just, stop eating butter, it's low fat, and eat your plants, period. That's even in the nutrition world, that's the bottom line. Let's just move forward. Where will you start? What one change at the top do you think it will be helpful?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, as if there is this one lever that can shift everything. And I really think in today's world, everything's a popularity contest and a beauty contest. So until someone who's very popular and beautiful says, hey, Sally's book helped me, it's not real. it's really a sad world we live in, and social media is shifting that even more. Like whatever is going on in social media that's popular, these trends and so on. And so that's one reason we're in so much trouble, because spinach is getting a pass. Smoothies are getting a pass. Beet, everything. Sweet potato, everything. This is all wonderful in our culture. So we need a big, like, come to Jesus meeting. If it's an alcoholic intervention, come on, people, you're getting drunk on the idea of plant foods being great, and it's literally wrecking the family. It is an analogy of what's going on. So that it's interesting, because I worked in medical education. I sat on the curriculum committee at the medical school at UNC as part of this big grant. I was the managing, what do you call it, project manager on it. And I was told directly by certain faculty, I was, sending information to medical faculty that taught certain things. What about this data here? How could you curb your message a little bit and acknowledge that there's other things going on out there? Because we were looking at more holistic and lifestyle ideas and integrating that in the curriculum of all the health professions there, nursing, pharmacy, dentistry, medicine, and so on. And I would meet with the faculty in the pharmacy department and say, we need to teach the first line pharmacist who's sitting right there in retail, who can be walked up to and say, can I take my garlic with this medication? We should make sure they know how to use the database to look up herb drug interactions. And because so many people are using these sort of herbal approaches and dietary and so on. And they just said, well, that's all weeds and seeds, and that's not what we teach. So you have to work with people with their biases, and it has to be within their social circle. So same thing in families. Sometimes we have to influence your daughter's best friend in order to get to your daughter, or your daughter's favorite uncle, and have the right person at the right moment. So we just have to be open to those moments. The leverage point can be when a loved one is suffering. If we can help them see that pain could have a solution. But even in my own family, we're having that problem. My mom had her toe cut off when we were at meat stock, and now all those drugs that happen to have the anesthesia, the pain meds, and the sleep meds, especially the anesthesia, has now given her confusion, hallucinations, dementia, and now she's got to learn to walk again, and she's 96. And unfortunately, my family insists on giving her chocolate and donuts, and they've been doing that. Yeah. So while recovering from the surgery, we're still doing that. And so I have very little. So what's the leverage? Where's the lever? One at a time, we'll find the people who are open to the idea that the way you eat affects today. It's not just about, oh, you're old. It affects today too. Today could be better.
Diane Jackson, I heard Sally talk on YouTube and bought her book because my husband, who has suffered for decades with kidney stones and had several procedures already, he's a little stubborn. And that's her comments on Kilt's Mighty Tribe. And I kind of write this word science.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're all been properly duped that science is some method of knowing greater than anything else the truth and the facts. Is this part of our brainwashing that actually is the most untrue statement we can know?
It is absolutely a big problem. And there's several people who've wrote books about this. Harris, what's his first name, wrote a book called Rigor Mortis. Richard Harris, I think his name is. He was an NPR. He's done a lot of things in his career as a media and author. And he does a great job in explaining like all the messed up incentives and all the, problems we get into in quote science, And so I've been writing research grants and specific games and submitting grants at NIH and helping, we built a whole department and building a school of public health here in Richmond. And, I just got so frustrated with the whole endeavor, just at that level. We have to, in order to get funding to do your research, in your description of your project, you basically have to kiss butt to whoever is going to review your grant, who's the big guy in your field. And you can't say, well, he was wrong. You're going to say, oh, he was really important and great, and I'm going to do this little tweak on it, kind of make it a little better. Like, you can't even step outside the box very far. And then we say we need innovation and research because this is such a big problem. We said we're going to fund innovative things, but there's so many layers where science is failing us, the idea of science. And you can see this echo chamber, and there's so much pressure to put out so many studies. For you to get tenure, you need a stack of papers this high of things you've written. No one's going to read them. They just want to see volume. And volume means schlock. It's sloppiness. You're not actually crossing your T's. You're not checking those references. For my research, for my book, I didn't believe every reference. I went back and saw who they were referring to and what that said to see if what they're claiming it said made any sense to me, and kept going backwards. And I was flabbergasted to find out that we knew that dietary oxalate caused severe health problems back in the 1840s. And for 100 years, this was a potential diagnosis. And it was controversial then, too. It wasn't fully embraced by everyone all over the world, but it was a known thing. And several people had been documenting what it is and curing things like carpal tunnel in the 1930s. There was what was it? The guy who was who later in life became more of an administrative guy. He's a brilliant clinician, but he was also really good at administration. So the Queen in England set him up, and he set up the whole British health system that they have now. And when he was young in his career, he wrote a great paper on carpal tunnel, how he and his colleagues were fixing it on a low oxalate diet. And I gave my husband carpal tunnel by feeding him sweet potatoes. He didn't like them when I met him, and I was like, you got to eat these. These are good. And
I go for you.
Swiss chard. So a lot of us wives and girlfriends have wrecked our men, making them eat salads. Because I think, your classic guy is pretty okay with a hamburger or a steak. It really doesn't need the salad so much. Not that salads are bad, because you don't have to give them up. If you love plant foods and you're really just trying to improve, oxalates are the place to start. So switch from spinach to lettuce. All the lettuce and most of the greens are low oxalate. So it's not a no green diet. But the few doctors who are aware of oxalate think of it as like vitamin K. And, all greens are bad, so that's bad. That's highly restrictive. So not eating spinach is not highly restrictive. There's plenty of lettuce and arugula and watercress. And if you got to eat that stuff, fine. You can have it, enjoy it. But just know it's not necessarily the end all be all for your health. It's a culinary variety, and it's color on the plate, and it fits in culturally, but it doesn't necessarily get you to that superstar status that wouldn't you like to have?
Mm-hmm.
We do have already piling up a lot of questions, so maybe
Cool.
we start
Let's
taking
start
some of them.
taking
Alia.
some. Okay,
I'm
great.
telling people ask the most clever things. Honest to God, it's so cool to hear what people's on people's minds. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so this is from Shannon. It's like a 3-part question. Let's see what it says. Okay. Since age 15, been carnivore 2 years now, felt great, but last 5 months, chronic headaches, heart palpitations, high blood pressure, and pulse, calcium deposits on teeth. I'm assuming oxalates.
Yes. So for the newbie, how could it be 2 years later, not eating oxalates, you have an oxalate problem? And this is a great example, Rob, of the science problems, because science says, well, you don't have oxalate deposits in your body tissues unless you have renal failure. So when your kidneys can no longer move it effectively, adequately out of the blood, you get this piling up in the body. This is a very simplistic. It's so many of the ideas in science are very kindergarten. Okay, you can eat this stuff and expose your mouth, throat, stomach, intestines to it. It's getting into at least the hepatic circulation. That's the blood supply to the digestive tract that takes it straight to the liver. It's getting in there because it slips between the cells. Oxalic acid comes as this little individual ion that is liberated in the juicing process and the smoothie process and the almond milk process. Great sources of oxalate. So how is it 2 years later you got oxalate problems? That's because it's been sticking to your tissues. It's in the body. It's guaranteed to be in your eyes, your brain, your bones, your bone marrow, your kidneys.
Mm.
Absolutely, because we grow up on peanuts, potatoes, and chocolate. Everybody's had some degree of potato chip or French fry or chocolate cake or candy at holidays full of chocolate or peanut butter. By the time you're 1.5 years old, you've already been given these foods, and you
Right.
continue to get them every day in ways we're just not even paying attention to. So what happens after a couple of years, your kidneys have cleaned themselves out. Most people have some degree of something called nephrocalcinosis, which is this background calcification of the kidneys, where the kidneys are holding on to the excessive oxalates so that it doesn't become stones in the tubules. So the tubules start filling up with oxalic acid, which crystallizes with the calcium and starts messing with the tubule cells. And so the tubule cells absorb them and pull them into the back room, the back alley, the interstitial spaces of the kidney, and hold on to them, waiting for that urine that's forming to have less oxalate so it can clean out. Well, now that you're a carnivore, you've certainly by accident cut out all these high oxalate foods, and the kidneys are really raring to go, helping you keep your blood level of oxalate lower because it's circulating as your body's just naturally maintaining tissues. So now you could be in a situation where the body is attacking the crystals that are in your joint spaces or bones or tendons or eyes. And so it's remobilizing junk, just like with the nephrocalcinosis, there's junk sitting around in the tissues that is unacknowledged in science that we're seeing as a community. Almost everyone gets some state later. And this is why within this world of a meat-based, meat-only diet, oxalate conversation doesn't go away. Some people would like it to just go away because it complicates the message. But the truth is, it just explains that the history of growing up on plants is now exposing its really awful underbelly. And now you have to mobilize gunk from your body that is messing with the basic mechanics of any cell. The most fundamental way a cell works is being destroyed in multiple ways. And so you get this high pulse in the blood pressure because you're creating electrolyte disturbances. You're creating periods of hypo and hypercalcemia, which messes with the pacemaker and messes with the arterial muscles. So it changes the tone of the arterial system, and you have trouble regulating your blood pressure. And this is very typical with oxalate deaccumulation illness, this sort of clearing illness that can occur when the body gets rigorous at it, where you end up in the emergency room with what feels like a heart attack or a stroke and literally could become one. Literally it could, because you have something called heart block occurring with all this interference with electromagnetics of the cell and the pacemaker, because you need these ions of calcium, potassium, and sodium in the proper places and the proper ratios in order to function as a cell. And that's particularly bad with the neurological tissues. And some people get into a lot of different neurological problems. They don't even recognize that these the palpitations are neurological and muscular in nature, but you can get other forms of muscle contraction that is neurological in nature. So when the nerves are toxic with oxalates, they get stuck in this kind of activated position, and it causes muscle activation, and you get things like hiccups and cramps and twitches and twitters and muscle knots, and you can start causing long-term damage to these cells. So you get changes, epigenetic damage, you get aging problems, you get false proteins, you get fibrosis. You start to really degenerate these tissues with this toxicity in time. But most of this stuff the body eventually recovers from. You just have to know with this oxalate deaccumulation, you've got high inflammation, you've got electrolyte disturbances. So you really need to keep paying attention. You can use calcium to address that hypocalcemia and stop, because the way the body's going to handle this oxalic acids coming out of your eyeballs and your shoulder joint, going into the bloodstream, lowering your blood calcium potentially. Now you have low blood calcium. So what is the body going to do? It's going to turn on this process of drilling holes in your bones to release calcium and other minerals like phosphate into the blood. And then you go from low calcium to high calcium. And so you're wobbling around with your calcium levels, not helpful for a pacemaker or any other cell. So if you're taking calcium routinely, this is very helpful for multiple reasons. One is it's a binder. It is the binder. So if your body is releasing oxalic acid, you have oxalate trying to get out of the body, and it gets out not just with the kidneys, it's getting into the bloodstream, coming out through the urine, but it also can come out through the colon. And when the body's stressed, particularly when it goes a little acidic because of all this inflammation, and the renal system is struggling with this, the intestine, especially the colon, turns on this excretion process. You have calcium in there that can grab that oxalate. The body excretes the oxalate, the calcium grabs it, binds it, and takes it away. So calcium lowers the stress, and the nervous system is a binder, and it also can help the body have a resource so it can handle this hypocalcemia without drilling holes in your bones. So we can, during this time, particularly when you have any of these symptoms, taking calcium is a huge benefit. And when people come to me in crises, because these episodes, headaches, heart palpitations, blood pressure, pulse, they're like, I got to go to the emergency room. I'm dying here. And so the first thing you want to do is alkalize with some lemon juice, take calcium, and take enough of it and keep taking it till you feel better, and then see if you really need the emergency room or not.
Okay, good.
Next question. I can answer this question, or you can. Where can I find Zoom meetings, and which days of the month do you have them? Thank you very much. Monday night, 5:30 Eastern, in the Kilts Mighty Tribe. I will email you, Shannon.
5:30 p.m. Eastern.
5:30 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, 5:30 p.m.
The link,
We're known to do AM too much.
Yeah.
the link to the Kilsmatic Tribe is in the description. If you're not a member, it's free to sign up. You'll get an email before the meetings. Is Mondays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time.
I also do Zoom meetings that are much more random because we have followers in Australia and California and Europe, and so we move them around. So we meet generally twice a month, and you have to check in on my website routinely to figure out when the next one is. We have one next week coming up, and that's a great chance to meet other people who are doing this, and I show a lot of slides and do some teaching and help it soak in and send you a ton of information. And we have one gal who's come, 160 times.
Wow.
We have fun.
Sal, a couple quick questions. The cows eat the grass. What happens?
Well, they chew on the grass, and then the bacteria eat the grass, and cows eat the bacteria.
And so ultimately, the oxalates for other animals. Do other animals have problems with oxalates, or is it just humans?
No, absolutely. We did big problems with oxalates in other animals causing abortion, what we call spontaneous abortion, which is a type of miscarriage, reproductive problems and dropping dead, and it can ruin a whole industry. We import a lot of lamb here because there's a wild weed in areas where lambing was an attempted industry here that would just ruin it because of the high oxalate content. So grass is not very high in calcium, even though it's growing in calcium soils. And there's several weeds that are high in oxalate, and there's not enough calcium in the diet to help offset the oxalate. So the animals can be very prone to this. The monogastrics are the horses and pigs and so on. And horses get a problem called big head, where they can't maintain their bones properly, and you get all this fibrotic growth, and their whole face swells up, and they get lame, and they can't walk, and they have to be put down. And the lambing industry pretty much got ruined by these weeds. But also, we've seen several incidences of putting together feeds that include things like beet greens in them, because we grow a lot of beets for the sugar beet. So we grow sugar, and then we have all this excess green stuff that's not part of the sugar making process. So what are you going to do with waste in agriculture? You feed it to your livestock. So we give them candy wrappers and beet tops, and oops, wait a minute. They all suddenly, some percent. So this is interesting too. You have a big flock of sheep or so, and you're giving them some feed that's got some high oxalate stuff in there, and only 20% of them get sick with depression and lameness. And then you put them on IVs of calcium and so on. And some of them die and some of them survive. So you can see that diversity where some of them get more sick more quickly. That's sort of the canaries in the flock that helps the whole flock suddenly be rescued by the farmers and the caretakers. So you see that biological variability there where the level of oxalate intake, and maybe those ones who got sick were eating more of that particular weed or at a certain growth state. The more you're in a growing state, the more you have this rapid cell turnover, that those tissues are even more vulnerable to the toxicity.
There's a journal called the United States Department of Agriculture's Journal on Plant Poisoning. I highly recommend it to everyone. Basically, even the animals that eat the plants get sick from eating plants.
Yes, they're designed to eat them, and yet, yeah.
And I always say, so basically, there's a journal for the domesticated animals, so that because when the domesticated animals get sick, they lose money. But when you and I get sick, they make money. And so is this a little bit of a conspiracy? Maybe.
Well, you get a more honest picture from veterinary literature.
Right.
There's very little placebo effect with animals. And there's just a much more honest, like, we got to take care of our animals and have them be well, and we got to prevent issues, not make drugs. The veterinary literature is not about, ooh, how can we make a product out of this? It's like, but the human literature is all about, ooh, opportunity for new profits. It's like, it's sick. It's so mercenary. So this is important to understand, that people will criticize me for putting up animal studies. Well, you do not want to do these kinds of studies on humans. It's not ethical. We're doing it to ourselves badly enough, and we're not in a position to clarify, how much of the effects are just the oxalate versus the flavonoids versus everything else versus your divorce, whatever, right? So, the veterinary literature is a very honest place to start finding some real facts. And
I don't know if there are any more of that, because I think it's changing in the past
changing too.
10, 20 years.
Basically, since the 1980s, I would say anything pre-1980s is more honest.
My daughter's dog has had 2 surgeries in the past 2 years, cost almost $15,000 between those 2. And
Wow.
he's now on 3 different medications. And so I think veterinary medicine has caught on with
the profit. You make more money as a vet than you make as a doctor. And in my neighborhood, I can think of 6 veterinary places within a 6-minute drive of my house. 6 of them.
Anyways,
how the doc in the boxes around here.
Next question. Lyndall see it. Okay. After 40-day juice fast, I was absolutely most broken. How can I aid in healing on top of carnivore?
Yeah, so it is important to manage this toxicity that the juicing set in and the other history of high oxalate foods. There's no question that there's this oxalate overload that's in your past diet that is now sitting in your tissues. You need to manage this. This is such an important message within this community. We need to honestly know that we're still dealing with oxalate poisoning, potentially for a decade of carnivore. And so it is important to aid your health. Now, so one of the problems with this intermittent inflammation of getting rid of the oxalate crystals is that inflammation creates acidity, and you're already eating a lot of sulfur containing amino acids and so on. So the tendency to go acid is really stressful in your system and sets you up for other problems. So you want to be thinking about addressing this with alkalinity. So often that's lemon juice. It can be Alka-Seltzer Gold. The Gold is no longer made. There's the heartburn that's equivalent to that. That's basically a bicarb citrate combination. And you're getting the citric acid from the lemon juice, which you can get it commercially for other conveniences. There's other enteric-coated alkalizers. So that may really help you, either taking lemons. And for kidney stones, you need at least a half cup of lemon juice a day. You can use even more of that because you're basically titrating out and giving a buffering option for your body so it can handle these surges of acidity. And so the other thing to manage is the electrolyte imbalance and the loss of minerals. The inflammation, the oxalates cause the body to shed potassium. and sodium and calcium. And so you have to keep making those available. Potassium is very important for inside the cells. It doesn't sit around in the bloodstream. You keep peeing it out. So when it's leaking out of cells, you just lose it because you're going to pee it out fast. So you need to have it during mealtime. So you need to put high potassium items, whether it's a supplement or a coconut water or something. You need something while your insulin is, you need insulin occasionally to help the cells kind of absorb nutrients. There's a real advantage to insulin helping the cells take in their meals. So you want to get that potassium back into those muscle and bone cells and protect your bones, because the chances are oxalate's been eroding your bone health, and potassium's so important to that and to muscle function and so on. So you need to provide enough electrolytes and minerals and deal with the acidity. Those are the two most fundamental tools that you have.
Okay, great. I'll ask the next question. FX Trader, which are the worst vegetables for human consumption?
Well, if we're just talking produce, classic produce, and we're not talking almonds, which is like, I really don't like almonds. It is the spinach, chard, and pea greens are the most commonly accepted that are really not healthy. And
like little peas, the green peas?
Not peas, the Swiss chard, pea greens, and the dark leafy greens.
Okay.
Beans, generally, beans are not so good because there's the lectins and the oxalates, and people don't know how to prepare them properly. And they will create, if you have a lot of lectins and oxalates, which should be undercooked, slow cooked beans, undercooked, not soaked properly, not prepared properly. And there are commercial products that can contain badly prepared legumes. They're very dangerous. And once you start destroying your gut health, it's really hard to come back from that. And that's what it'll do.
Wow. Okay. Thomas, target program. I have bad back itching for a long while now. Even have a back scratcher on hand. Could that be oxalate dumping?
Yes, and most of my skin clients are guys. I've had a couple of women, but I have a couple of guys, just dreadful. They're still struggling 3 or 4 years into it, where their sheets are bloody, their clothes are bloody.
Oh, wow.
So bad. The skin destruction for some people is very real. But I've seen mostly it's like a 6-month process, but eventually this will get better. But things like Epsom salt baths and so on might help, but you need to lower the inflammation in the body. Sometimes we have to use tea or other forms of oxalate. We can tell the body to stop this inflammation and stop attacking all these crystals in an excessive way. So you can moderate this process by taking in some beet juice. I put people back on some oxalate foods because it's now a medication. So they went from the past eating like thousands of milligrams, like grams and grams of oxalate. Now we're going to use a small amount, 50 to 100 milligrams as a medication to tell the body, signal the body in the blood, get it into the bloodstream enough to tell the body, slow this down. And you need to stop this inflammation. Ultimately, a deranged immune system will take you down. You don't want to let the immune system go crazy and make you suffer. If you're extremely suffering, you're somebody who needs to start using black tea, beet juice, or some other oxalate foods as medications for when this is going on. And you can calm down. If you're getting enough, you can calm these down and help your immune system take a break.
Okay, great. Let's see. Marcy, me, I've been feeding my dogs, I think, AMS for years. Lost my 11-year-old German Shepherd last August due to cancer. Vet recently found benign tumor on 12-year-old poodle. Should dogs be fed carnivore? Yes.
They are carnivore. And well, cats are even more carnivore. And clearly, humans have developed this relationship with dogs from way, way back. They were assisting us in hunting large animals. And when we would take down a large animal, the dog does well on the lean muscle meat. And so we can give the lean muscle meat to them and lose nothing because we like the fat and the skin and the organs and the choice, delicious parts to us, and the dogs can have the lean meat. So it's just a match made in heaven. And now we're taking the dogs down this merry-go-round of commodity grains and produce is somehow okay.
Yeah, all foods in the veterinary industry, according to their guidelines, must have a percentage of vegetables. So you don't find any commercially available food, because I've looked for my dog or for my daughter's dog, and you don't find any that is purely from meat. Now you can buy meat, feed your dog meat, but there's no commercially available foods that do not have vegetables.
Yeah, it's sad. It's really, but it does make money because people will spend that money on those veterinary bills.
Tell me
The
about it.
perfect system for our pets and our human brothers and sisters. The system is perfectly aligned.
It's really, we're so caught up in it and so willing to go along with it as generally as a species, and what we're doing culturally to go along with that, and not standing up for something better. It's sad we're settling for the way things are. And when that's what this movement in ancestral health and healing is doing for us, is giving us a tribe so we can stand up to it, at least in our own lives, and just take care of number one, regardless of what your children or your cousins or your brothers think, like, just do it.
What are the effects of oxalates and plants on things like menopause symptoms? I'm talking about menopause coming up soon, and looking back at the ancient literature, in many indigenous cultures don't have words or experiences for menopause. Is it a modern disease? Is it propagated by you're sick, you must have to be prepared for this? And where do these foods come in on menopause and PCOS and other diseases of the women's reproductive system?
This is a great example of many emerging questions that are coming out of this community that's now oxalate aware and seeing a probable connection. And I saw it in my own health history. I never had a lot of reproductive symptoms, but I also have another wrinkle because I'm a DES daughter. So there's a whole generation of us whose moms were given this strong estrogen, this synthetic estrogen, in a lousy, unscientific attempt to prevent miscarriage. My mother needed to be on thyroid medication. That's why she was having miscarriages. And I was even a miscarriage. I was her fourth miscarriage. The doctor said, "Oh, go to bed for a couple of days. This is another miscarriage." And lo and behold, here I am. But sometimes rough moments make you stronger. So whatever was going on there, whether it's placental tear or a twin dying, I ended up being long and tall, and here I am. So, but here, fast forward, I didn't know I had endometriosis. I didn't know my ovaries were destroyed until we cut me open for a hysterectomy. Wow. At 48, cut me open, loose blood in the pelvic cavity, scarring on the colon, endometrial scarring. And now endometriosis can be very painful. Yeah. And yet I had no symptoms at all. They had to confirm it in pathology. And it was a mess in there. And so they took it all out, and there's menopause, right? And luckily on the recovery table, I'm like, give me a patch, because it only takes like 5 minutes and your whole system is struggling with hormonal stuff. And so I had that kind of menopause. Unfortunately, that's becoming common, just like birth on demand with C-sections and so on. The menopause is like surgical too often too. So there's all kinds of menopause. And I really do think that there's no question that my diet style in childhood was whole foods. I loved my regular whole foods, and I wasn't a picky kid who didn't like the fat on the meat and all that. My sisters, especially one of them who really was a picky kid, she had all kinds of reproductive problems. She had PMS and all this stuff. She had struggling with her pregnancies too, and she was not a DES daughter. And so I really see that nutritionally, we're going to see menopausal problems. And oxalate is part of the story. It's not just the junk food and the malnutrition from all the candy and the breakfast cereal and the waffles and the pizza and just stuff that isn't real food. You could be having the oxalate damage. And we're certainly seeing in reproduction. there's plenty of initial evidence in the medical literature about the effects on reproduction generally, where your ability to get pregnant and to stay pregnant is highly threatened, and your ability to carry a baby to term. And so I want to encourage people to go to my YouTube channel, because back on Mother's Day, I released a video sharing 3 stories of families with calcified placentas, which were falling apart and being damaged by high oxalate diet.
Wow.
Therefore, they needed early delivery, like the body went into delivery early because the placenta was failing. And then we had problems with breast milk loaded with oxalate, and people who switched to carnivore from a keto diet, high almond flour diet keto, switched at the end of the second pregnancy, releasing oxalate like crazy through the breast milk with crystals and clogged ducts, and babies with vulvodynia and diaper rashes and just a mess. And now age 5, still having episodes of oxalate release in children. So, I mean, I'm going all over with menopause, because menopause is one chapter in the story of reproductive health, and how women are being failed by modern medicine. And we're feeling terrible from the time you get your first period to you try to get pregnant to the time your system is starting to shut down. It's not going well. And there's no question this is a modern life thing, and a diet is a big piece. And I completely suspect oxalates are a major player in this suffering, because women are so prone to want to eat salads to stay thin, and are more plant-centric in their eating style. And so they have been loading themselves up with these foods unknowingly, because just like Dr. Kiltz, who doesn't know that, hey, spinach causes kidney stones, nobody knows that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Wow,
know
we
if
have so many questions. So what should we do here? Because Sally, this has been so entertaining, but an hour has passed already.
Well, they go to SallyNorton.com.
it's SallyKNorton.com.
SallyKNorton.com.
Sally Norton's a pretty like Fred Smith kind of name, so we needed the K for sure. So, let's remember the K. Come meet me at my website. You can get a PDF cookbook, but if you wait a month, you'll be able to get it in print on demand in a new kind of version that's all more beautified, a few new recipes. The Toxic Superfoods is the only thing that is my commercial product on the standard book market. And the data companion, so helpful to people who are now adding back oxalate and just giving you right to the data. The data online, don't go to the data online. It's terrible. We worked hard 5 years of vetting information and coming up with a database that could give you this color-coded list where you can see some things are really out over the top and other things are kind of okay. And so if you're trying to help people move towards a more meat-centric diet, this is the place to start, because not everybody's going to do full carnivore. But if they can just detoxify their plantiness, you can save a vegan. They can still hang on to their veganness, and they start getting their brains back and their mental health back. And they'll be ready for some butter and some shrimp and some bacon, and you got them on the way to better nutrition. This is a great entry point for that. So if you're interested in really helping and changing people's lives, start with the oxalate toxicity piece. Start with some like actual facts and data that can sometimes bring in the logical mind and the desire, the recognition that we could do better.
Exactly. Love that. Where do we get the data companion? Because I know we can get Toxic Superfoods on Amazon. Do we go to your website?
Only on my website. That's the only
Okay.
place you can get it, because I wanted the spiral binding, and this shape that this printer offers is not available. You can't produce it other than print on demand. So you can only get this on my website for practical reasons, because I want you to be able to use it and flip it around and make it work for you. Yeah.
SallyKNorton.com.
You guys are awesome. It's so
We
fun.
love you, Sally. We love you.
Thank you for being here.
Back.
Thank you for
Well,
being
we gotta
here.
do the giveaway.
Let's do the giveaway.
Do the giveaway.
What are we giving away today?
We were going to give away a copy of Toxic
Toxic
Superfoods.
Okay.
Here we go. Let's see here. Is on the screen. Add to stage. And giveaway. It's a drum roll. Drum roll, please.
Winner.
Congratulations. Just won a copy of Toxic Superfoods. Please email me, alia@drkiltz.com with your name, address, and telephone number, and I will get that shipped to you.
Where are you going to be next,
Yay.
Sally? Sally, you going to any meetups coming up?
Well, I'm going to be checking out a peptide conference. I'm going to a premiere of a movie coming out. Are you going to that?
I'm
He
in
is.
LA.
Yeah,
The answer is most likely.
probably. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll see you there, and then maybe at Hack Your Health in November.
Oh yeah, happy health.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Awesome.
All right, I got to get to my 7 o'clock patient. Love you.
Okay,
Thank
goodbye,
you.
Dr. Fields. Goodbye, everybody. End these